All right, making educational videos about base jumping for the internet, kind of silly for two reasons. Reason number one, if you're learning to base jump from videos on the internet, well, good luck to you. And reason number two, everyone already knows that every base jumper on the internet knows everything. There are many reasons to rely on a static line deployment. Maybe you don't have a friend to PCA you. Maybe you don't have a friend that you trust to PCA you. So let's take a quick look at how to set up your static line. All right, so pretty much the first thing you want to do when static lining is check the anchor. Check what you're actually going to static line off of. Make sure it's secure, make sure it's strong, make sure it hasn't suffered any damage, and make sure it's not going to come off the exit with you. Just like everything else, there are several ways to set up your static line. This is brake cord. It's got an 80-pound brake strength when in a single strand like this. Typically, base jumpers tie it in a loop. That loop will actually create a force closer to 160 pounds. The whole time you're preparing to do a static line jump, you want to make sure that you're not creating any excess snags or loops that could potentially mess up the jump. So I'm going to pull my pilot chute out, manage the bridle, make sure it goes straight to the pins. Where you're going to tie a loop into your bridle changes dependent upon the jump that you're doing. Typically, it's going to be somewhere around midway. Now that I've figured out where I would like to tie a knot or a loop into my bridle, I'm going to make sure I tie a knot that does not slide, doesn't allow the bridle to move. So I'm tying just an overhand knot in this bridle. You also want to make sure you avoid leaving a big long loop that would allow your brake cord to slide around there, creating a lot of friction and ultimately damaging the brake cord. I've checked my anchor, I've checked my brake cord, I've got a knot where it needs to be about midway, and now it's time to tie off. I'm gonna thread the brake cord through the anchor, through the bridle. I'm using a surgeon's knot. What we're trying to do here is tie a knot that isn't going to allow the brake cord to slide when it gets loaded. For this style of jump, I'm going to tie my backup right here at the same point. For my backup brake cord, I'm trying to tie a loop that is bigger than my first brake cord loop, which allows them to brake not at the same time. If for any reason, if it were to break premature, my backup loop here would still function just the same. Probably one of the most important parts is a final gear check. A number of jumpers have found ways to wrap themselves in their bridles or the anchor. So really pay attention as you're tying yourself in and then as you're approaching the exit. So my bridle goes from my pins straight to my brake cord attachment. And then for this type of jump, I'm gonna manage my pilot chute and bridle with my right hand, almost as if I were going to go handheld. All right, again, it's not between my legs, it's not through my harness anywhere. I also want to make sure that I'm bringing the bridle and the anchor as close to the exit as possible, not leaving any slack that can wrap around something, snag something, or compromise the system. I've done my final gear check, it's time to base jump. So what's actually happening during the process of a static line jump? Let's take a closer look. The first step of any good base jump is a final gear check. Check to make sure that you're properly tied, routed, and not going to become entangled. The next step is the jumper leaves the object, tensioning the bridle, the anchor, and the brake cord. Quickly, the bridle and the brake cord are fully tensioned. The pins are extracted from the closing loops, allowing the container to open. The next step is line stretch. The parachute comes out of the container and the lines come out of the tail pocket. At this point, the brake cord has exceeded its maximum load, brakes, and it's time to fly your parachute. Let's talk about some of the commonly made mistakes on static line jumps. First thing we're gonna do is make sure you're static lining off of a solid object. That's right, check your anchor. Make sure it's not gonna move, make sure it's not gonna break, make sure you have a solid anchor. If brake cord suffers any damage, it will break with considerably less force. So make sure it doesn't show any signs of friction or damage or pizza stains. Another simple step in making sure you have a perfect static line setup is examining the length of any anchor you might use. The longer the anchor, the higher the likelihood that you're going to break your brake cord prematurely. Inversely, the shorter the length of your anchor, the more likely it is that you're going to prematurely open your container and drag your pilot chute bridle parachute off the side of the exit, causing all kinds of other hazards. So consider the length of your anchor carefully. Also, be mindful of sharp edges. Any rusted edge, sharp edge, not rounded edge can potentially be a hazard to any number of the parts of your system. Another thing you're going to want to be mindful of is the knots that you tie into your system. Make sure they're dressed tight. Make sure that they're not sliding knots. Make sure that you haven't tied anything to the wrong part of your system. These are all mistakes that happen too often. During static line jumps, you have a lot of material out. You're trying to manage a bridle, a pilot chute, static line, an anchor. You're also trying to climb over an exit. So it's important to just slow down and be very observant how you maneuver around that exit. Jump like it matters, because it always matters. If you mess up a static line jump, it's highly likely you're going to get mangled. Have fun. And to all you armchair internet-based jumpers, I look forward to being schooled on how to static line safely on the internet, on your athlete page, to your friends that you've never met.